In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, two brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, John Flack and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears. Hello and welcome to the Retro Movie Roundtable. I am your host, Russell Guest, and I've got some sad news. Unfortunately, on short notice, John Flack, my usual good friend and co-host, will not be joining me today. But I'm still excited because I'm not alone. With me is a great guest today, my good friend and special guest, my co-pilot for today, Mr. Bryan Frye. Bryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and frequently confused with John when it comes to our last name. So, Frick and Frack are common issues with us.
Yes. This is John and Frye go way back. I met them both at the same time, and it's not just me. It seems like everybody seems to get them mixed up and just say, "Hey, Flack" or Frye. I mean, it's the other one. So, I have even blended both names at once and said "Fly" on more than one occasion. So that
I like that. Is that our Brangelina name?
Yeah, it collectively addresses you both at once. So
Got it.
So
It's even funnier since we look nothing alike.
Yeah. So welcome to the Veterans Day episode. In case you're not from America and you're listening to the show, Veterans Day is where the United States, we honor those who have served in the armed forces. And so they're very important people who keep us safe, and we really appreciate them. So we dedicate this episode to all the veterans out there. Thank you so much. Bryan, do you know any veterans yourself?
Absolutely. My uncle, who passed away recently, was a colonel in the U.S. Army. Got to go to his service. He was interred in Arlington. That was an experience, and I just want to echo what you already said and say thank you to all of our servicemen and women, first responders, everything. Thank you.
For those at home who haven't actually gotten to know you yet, what kind of movies do you like?
I like it all. Even genres that I probably don't lean toward at times, I'm still able to be surprised by. I've been to see a couple straight up romance movies where I was like, man, I'm scared. I actually kind of like that one a little bit. So I'll watch just about anything, but I would say my preferences turn more toward your nerdy cult classic. I'll go superhero, sci-fi, action, all of the above.
Bryan, I'm about to ask you some hard-hitting, deeply personal questions. Are you prepared for this?
Oh, absolutely. I've already voted.
What movie, we just came off of Halloween, so what movie-related costumes have you ever worn? Like, which are some of your best ones?
In my heyday of Halloween, which was probably college to about 5 years ago, my wife Jessica and I have always sought to do couples-related costumes. And we cranked out some really good ones some years, but I would say my all-time favorite is when we went as Star-Lord and Gamora. Obviously, this is a podcast, so I can't show you pictures, but we really rocked it out. I actually had to go to like 4 thrift shops to find a cassette player for the costume. I now own a really awesome leather jacket from Goodwill that is bright red. Well, not bright red, but that kind of burgundy red. And that one was by far the most fun to do.
I remember the photos from Facebook for sure, and it was very, very cool. And Jessica was painted green, and it was.
Oh yeah, she went all out for it.
It was
which was interesting. The interesting part about painting your spouse green, outside of the fact that I'm not sure if everyone's ever had to experience that, but not only do you have to try to not get it on your home, but then when you show up to the home of the party you're going to and find that all of their furniture is white, she also has to be quarantined.
To quote The Hangover, not my problem. So, anyway.
You go out and sit in the grass.
Yeah. What is a movie that you would have watched that your parents probably didn't want you to see yet?
I can tell you one definitively that I still give them crap about to this day is I went to see The Matrix, and I want to say it was like 2 weeks after Columbine happened, and The Matrix was getting all of this bad press because it was people wearing all black in trench coats, toting lots of guns. So my parents went immediately to the overreaction of he can't watch this movie. Clearly, it will twist his mind. Well, I'd already seen it. I was asking for forgiveness instead of permission. Fantastic movie. It definitely got embargoed for about 4 years in my household, so I couldn't own it. Finally, I got my dad to watch it, and he was like, "Oh, that was a really good movie. Yeah, you can get that."
I was that's funny. I went to the theaters with my parents. They didn't have an issue with that one. I was sheltered from several for a long time, but that's one that I got away with no trouble with. So that's interesting. Bad timing in terms of a tragedy taking away a great movie away from you. So.
Oh, absolutely. And I was the breaking barriers child, so I was the one that got to knock all the walls down. So my brother had a pretty easy way of skating on.
No, that's fair. That's how it goes. I'm the youngest, so and maybe I didn't have to appeal too hard. So normally I'd ask, have you seen any movies lately? And I'll definitely ask you that. But we're coming off the heels of October, and I'm just wanting to see, did you watch any scary movies this month? Anything in particular that stands out?
Oh, I definitely watched some scary movies this month. I watched Halloween for the first time in a zillion years.
There's an episode for that. Check it out if you haven't listened to it.
For the sole purpose of going to see the new Halloween, which my wife and I are cursed on seeing movies in theaters. There were like 4 movies in theaters right now I want to see, and we're just failing miserably to get there. But the one thing I'd really like to plug, if anybody hasn't seen it yet, is the Haunting on Hill House miniseries on Netflix. Oh my gosh, that is one of the scarier, awesome things they have put out. And just kudos for them with continuing to crank out timely and interesting content.
No, I have gotten several recommendations for that one. I will someday get to it. I'm pretty slow on the TV intake, but and so in general, what was the last movie you've seen?
Give me just a second on this because I think I kind of had a train wreck of several. I'd say the last movie I saw was Blade. I rewatched Blade.
The first one, right?
Yep. All 3 of them were on Netflix as well, and I was flipping through and just needed something to watch, and I go, oh yeah, Blade, definitely. And I'll tell you what, that movie holds up. I still really enjoy that. I'm a Stephen Dorff fan. I know a lot of people have probably completely forgotten who he is, but man, he made a fantastic villain in that. So anyway, if you have a chance to rewatch that, very enjoyable.
I didn't know the name Stephen Dorff, but if you said villain in Blade, I do remember him being quite good for that. So let's get into today's movie. We're going to talk today about 2001's Black Hawk Down. It grossed $108.6 million. It placed 18th in the box office in 2001. It placed it placed ahead of Princess Diaries and behind Spy Kids. So it got an IMDb rating of 7.7, and the critics of Rotten Tomatoes give it 76%, and the audience score is 88%. So got some good reviews here. Brian, have you seen Black Hawk Down before? If so, when was your first time? What were your thoughts coming in?
I think I saw Black Hawk Down in theaters. I'm also fairly certain that I bought it on DVD not too long after. I would say Black Hawk Down is in my top 3 to 5 go-to war movies to just chuck on, and I'd watch it just whenever, or I would stop on it if it were on and I was searching for something to watch. It's just an easy one for me to be like, oh yeah, Black Hawk Down, let's do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a shame that John's not here also. I mean, he selected it, and he is also a really big fan of it as well. So, John also saw it pretty close to the time it came out, and so for representing him for not being here, he's a big fan of this movie. I, however, did not see this until I got to college. So I'm seeing this movie probably in like 2012 or so, maybe. And so I didn't have as good of a time with it the first time. I saw the huge cast, and it was Ridley Scott, and I went in with really high expectations. And maybe because it was Ridley Scott, I was thinking it'd be a little more of a... I didn't think it would be this gritty. And so it's a heavy movie. And, coming back to it, I was in a better frame of mind this time around. But, particularly the first time I watched it, I had a tougher time with it. So you probably knew what you were getting in for better than I did.
Sure. I would also say that, and it's funny that you bring up college. John was my roommate freshman year of college, and he and I used to like fall asleep to movies like this. Like we would have, and specifically Ridley Scott, we would fall asleep to Gladiator all the time because once the movie was over, that "Now You Are Free" song would play on repeat for the DVD menu. And man, if you can't sleep to that song, you can't sleep to anything.
Well, we're going to get into this movie, and we're going to have to spoil it. But before we do, we have a message from the United States Army. So that's pretty exciting. So here we go.
Yeah.
Look here, green leaves, I will make you into soldiers. Now raise your bags at arm's length from your body, chest height until I say so, and keep them up. What is this, Private Cottrell? Is this a non-issued army belt around your waist?
Maybe, sir.
What makes you think that you can walk in here like that? Did you just forget? What else did you forget, Private Cottrell? Did you equip your latest episode of Retro Movie Roundtable?
Yes, Drill Sergeant, sir.
Private, did you give Retro Movie Roundtable a rating, review, and subscription? Drop here and give me 40, maggot. Don't you know the Retro Movie Roundtable needs your ratings, reviews, subscriptions to build this army of movie lovers and let them know how they can make the show better? I bet you did not even like the show on Facebook, much less write the show at Retro Movie Roundtable at yahoo.com.
No, sir.
Are you dead, soldier? Do you think that you're special? I will whip you into shape. I will show you how to dress, rate, review, subscribe, like, and write the show like a United States soldier.
Yes, sir, Drill Sergeant, sir. Wow, it's nice to know the United States Army is behind the podcast and supporting the show. That's pretty cool, huh?
I think I've met that drill sergeant before.
He's intense. I wouldn't mess with him. I'd rate and review the show if I were you. He'll make you do some push-ups. Anyway, so we're about to have to spoil the movie, and to kick us off is Brian. We're going to get the plot summary from you. Is that good?
Oh, yeah. Black Hawk Down is a war drama which was based on a best-selling book detailing a nearly catastrophic mission in the Somali capital of Mogadishu to capture 2 lieutenants of the Somali warlord who ruled the city named General Hadid. Around 100 men of a U.S. Army Ranger and Delta Force Command went in on October 3, 1993. The warlord in question was responsible for the genocide and ethnic cleansing of thousands of Somalians, as well as the murder of 9 Pakistani peacekeepers from the UN. Using the Army Ranger Air Cav approach, as well as ground transport vanguard, the Rangers and Delta Unit proceed into the city and secure the target building without much opposition. Things changed, however, when Chalk 4, under the command of Sergeant Eversman, Josh Hartnett's character, sustained a casualty when a Ranger missed the rope and fell from the Black Hawk. This started a chain of events leading to the eventual loss of 2 helicopters and the ground unit's valiant efforts to hold to one of their most time-honored traditions of never leave a man behind. After the soldier is secured, he is then taken to the convoy, but as this is happening, the Black Hawk, providing close air support, is struck in the rudder by an RPG, causing it to crash, killing both pilots. At this point, the U.S. forces face the hard decision to split their forces. Sergeant Eversman's Chalk proceeds to the first crash site, while an advanced unit of the ground force takes the wounded soldier back. A larger force of Rangers and Delta members also pushed toward the first crash site. However, due to the ever-increasing volume of enemy combatants, they soon accrue too many casualties to continue. The fight doesn't go any better for the primary ground team, as nearly every soldier ends up wounded or dead before being forced to abandon their first attempt to reach crash site number 1. A second Black Hawk is then shot down, providing support over this crash site. 2 Delta snipers request to be dropped off at this site to secure it until backup arrives. The narrative continues to darken as troops that the movie has done a pretty good job developing start to fall. The 2 Delta snipers are eventually overrun and the pilot they were defending is captured. Losses continue to increase at the first crash site as well until U.S. forces end up enlisting the help of the UN Peacekeepers Armor Division to go in and get them out. The movie, to me, is a testament to the honor and brotherhood held by our soldiers. In the end, 18 American soldiers were killed and 73 wounded. I think the total casualties ended up being 20. The downed pilot was also recovered. As the movie states at the end, the Somali general is soon after, well, I don't think it was super soon, but maybe 2 years after, killed, and the general who was in charge of his capture retired.
It's a movie with a lot of stuff going on, that's for sure. It's disorienting at times. So, good job.
Yeah, it definitely requires. I don't think I could have probably put that synopsis together having watched it once. I think it's it's definitely born of me watching that movie a lot.
No, and that's what I'm saying. This is the kind of movie to fully really absorb. You need to see it more than once. I think that also contributed to the first time I walked away pretty unhappy, out of there just not following very well. It is based on a true story. It was a 1999 book by journalist Mark Bowden. So this is not a fictional story, as Brian mentioned. So these things really happened. It's been simplified, and even though there's an expansive set of characters, they actually did trim it down, believe it or not, to focus on a smaller core set of characters. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they definitely take some liberties, as Hollywood will. But I definitely think that in terms of really paying attention to more the plight than the individuals is the key to it. And really the grit. Like you said, it is a gritty movie, but the grit that most of these guys show in order to really not back down and get the job done.
So this is normally where John would give us a walk through the casts and the characters of the movie, but I'm going to have to collaboratively share this with you, Brian, because I just can't do it as well as John. So I'll walk you through the cast here, and feel free to add some on there. We got Josh Hartnett as Eversman.
We also have Ewan McGregor as Grimes. I'm a huge Ewan McGregor fan.
We have Tom Sizemore as McKnight.
Eric Bana is Hoot, also one of my favorite characters in the movie. Oddly enough, it was his first U.S. movie.
That's right. William Fichtner as Sanderson. He did a great job on this one. I feel like you might know him from Talladega Nights.
Yeah, and next we got Ewan Bremner. And, the first movie I saw him in was Train Spotting, so also not one of those more uplifting movies, although it was just a shade happier than Requiem for a Dream when we're going into movies about heroin.
Another war movie that has been in was Wonder Woman. So
True. I think he's a really good supporting character. Just anytime I see him in a movie, I'm like, it's him.
So we got Sam Shepard as Garrison. I wasn't as familiar with Sam Shepard. He looked familiar. The name's very familiar. Help jog my memory. Why do we know Sam Shepard?
Oh, he does a lot of Westerns. He's kind of that hard-nosed, get-it-done kind of, older gentleman. He's the Sam Elliott, of the world. Just one of those guys that you usually see as a general or the commander of something or head cowboy, something like that.
So we got, I'm going to pick up the pace here just a little bit and pick up a couple of these later ones. Gabriel Casseus as Kurth. Kim Coates as Wex. Hugh Dancy as Schmid. Ron Ellard as Durant. Ione
Russ, let me
Grufford-
jump in here real quick.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in on Ron Eldard real quick. Absolutely love him just because if you've ever seen the movie Mystery Alaska, he plays Skank Martin. Yes, his name is actually Skank. Absolutely fantastic movie, very heartwarming. If you're into sports movies, absolute must see. But that was my introduction to him, and just really enjoy seeing him in film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got Ian Grufford as Beals, Tom Geary as Uric, Charlie Hoffheimer as Smith, Danny Hoke as Pilla, and Jason Isaac as Steele. He seems low billed on this for me. Maybe his name value wasn't what it is now at the time.
One of the few movies where he's not a bad guy.
Yeah. He's good at being a bad guy, though.
I always think of Mel Gibson's The Patriot.
So we've got Glenn Morshower as Matthews and Jeremy Piven as Wolcott. And I think we'll cut it off at that point. If you hadn't noticed, this is a deep, deep cast. So.
Oh, absolutely.
What do we think?
And
go ahead.
Even if you don't have name recognition on a couple of these people, if you saw their faces, you're like, oh, that guy.
It is a fine. I was going to say that. Like, it's a fine collection of. Oh yeah, that guy's normally a quality tertiary kind of supporting piece, and so, as we kind of alluded to earlier, this is a movie that's not really about an individual. It doesn't really have a strong centralized protagonist. It's about a unit. And that's why it's very appropriate that it's our Veterans Day episode, because it's a team of people coming together, and so the story attempts to tell lots of things about this big unit of men who are working together. So,
yeah, I think if there was, I mean, obviously, given the billing, if you were going to give somebody the moniker of star of the movie, it would be Josh Hartnett, which I was actually okay with this. A lot of people do not like Josh Hartnett. I am not one of those people. I think he's been a highly underrated actor. Typically get really excited when I see him and stuff, even his small parts like Sin City. But if you ever have a chance, watch Penny Dreadful. He's fantastic in that. And he even does some just weird off-the-wall stuff. So,
a couple of fun casting notes. Tom Hardy, while buried in the listing there, this is his first feature film. So,
yep.
Where do we spot Tom Hardy, Brian?
Tom Hardy is one of the heavy, or I should say light machine gun pieces of Josh Hartnett's unit. He actually initially gets separated from the primary group as they were moving to the first crash site. And eventually he gets back together with two other members that had been separated and add a little bit of reinforcements to Josh Hartnett's beleaguered unit.
Man, you nailed it. Ridley Scott also offered Russell Crowe the role of Sergeant Norm Hooten, the Delta Squad leader. However, Crowe had turned down the role due to scheduling conflicts. He went on to be in A Beautiful Mind, which worked out really well for him. That movie went well. But Crowe was a huge fan of the film Chopper and from 2000 and strongly recommended that Eric Bana take the role in his place. And as history played out, Eric Bana did get the role. So that's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I have a really hard time picturing anybody but Eric Bana for this part at this point. I mean, you always hear about other actors who passed on big roles and stuff like that. And I'm a Russell Crowe fan, so I'm not hating on him being in that role. But man, if you really, watch this movie and you watch Eric Bana, it's just, gosh, I can't picture anybody else playing that part.
Yeah, and Eric Bana said he found the experience of this one to be ultra realistic, and he even said at some points he even felt that he was forgetting that he was making a movie. So that was a pretty cool line from him. Another interesting casting note I have is Grimes, played by Ewan McGregor, is a fictional character, and though given his administrative position and Penchant for Coffee, he's unabashedly based on a real-life ranger, which was John Stebbins, who was awarded the Silver Star for his actions during the battle and was a very brave soldier. Unfortunately, Stebbins was convicted in 2000 of child molestation and is currently serving a 30-year prison term. So, as a result, the Pentagon apparently pressured the screenwriters to alter the name in the film, and they plan to do this anyway. And so, Grimes is based on a real hero who has, unfortunately, a checkered future after this. And so, probably a good call. What do you say?
Yeah, I think I'm glad that they worked the character into the movie. Like I said, I'm a huge Ewan McGregor fan, all about the Obi-Wan Kenobi. But his character is one of the few comic relief moments in the film as a whole, and I think that it would have suffered without the addition of that character.
I would go as far to say he might be the most interesting character of the bunch, but again, it's a very decentralized set of characters, more so than usual. I feel like we're starting to drift that way. What do you say we get into the film creation? What do you think about Ridley Scott as a director and how he did this movie, Black Hawk Down?
So I'm kind of one of those sun rises and sets with Ridley Scott kind of people. Not saying that he's necessarily my favorite director, but he's really close up there. He produced Blade Runner, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. He's just one of those guys that if I see him directing a movie, I'm all about it. Just sign me up. Don't have to ask me twice kind of thing. And, even the movies that he gets knocked for, like Kingdom of Heaven, that was one of my favorite movies. I love that movie. And I'm a glutton for historical fiction movies. And, if you give me a movie that's 4 hours long and watchable, which I think is what a lot of people disagree with, sign me up for all 4 hours.
Well, let's go through some of the playlists as you're talking about. Like, point out some of the ones there that you particularly like, as you did. You pulled on that Kingdom of Heaven, but I mean, obviously, 79 Alien is a really watershed early film for him. 82's Blade Runner. 85 Legend. 89 Black Rain. 91.
Black Rain's awesome.
Thelma and Louise. 1997, another military movie, G.I. Jane. I'm a fan of that one.
I have multiple copies of it. It's a great workout movie. I like any movie that really focuses on military boot camp. Highly recommend them for your exercises. Gets you pumped up.
I don't know how I feel about G.I. Jane when I'm working out. It doesn't make me feel very good to see everybody. I don't know. I want to see a bunch of fat people in boot camp not doing well, so I feel like, oh, I'm doing pretty good here. But seeing Demi Moore and Viggo Mortensen and all these other people ripped and doing a great job makes me kind of think, it's like, I'm not going to get there. I may as well just pack it up, sit at my desk and make some building drawings. So
I think for me personally, the hardest thing, it would be harder for me to pick a movie by Ridley Scott I didn't like than it is for me to talk about all the ones that I did.
Okay, I was going to keep going here. Gladiator 2000. Hannibal 2001, that might be a little misstep for me. Are you still holding through on that one?
Not out of the. I liked Red Dragon and I like Silence of the Lambs so much more that I probably would pass on that one. But
okay. Thought so. Black Hawk Down 2001. Someone should make a podcast episode about that. Matchstick Men in 2003. Kingdom of Heaven in 2005. A Good Year 2006. American Gangster 2007. Body of Lies 2008. Controversial remake of Robin Hood 2010. Is that one still in the good category for you?
I actually have that one too. it's another one that caught a lot of crap, and I was like, nope, still enjoy it. Look, if you look at this, like, okay, you've got Costner's Robin Hood, you got the Disney one with the fox,
Yep.
you've got the BBC TV show. You know, there's not a ton of Robin Hood out there, so why really argue with a different take on it? Now there is a new one coming out, and it smacks of the Guy Ritchie King Arthur, so we'll see how that one does. But yeah, man, you know, it's Robin Hood. Sign me up.
Prometheus 2012 and The Martian in 2015. I loved The Martian. And Alien Covenant in 2017, which got mixed reviews for sure. So many of those are up there for me. I certainly love the Alien series, Gladiator, and Martian all pop out as my top Ridley Scott ones. Is this one your favorite Ridley Scott effort? Oh, you said it would be Blade Runner, didn't you?
Yeah, Blade Runner would be my favorite Ridley Scott.
Okay. What are some of the themes, being that you're well versed in his, like, what do you like about him as a director? What did he bring to the table?
Well, he targets a couple genres that, you know, are sweet spots for me. Like I said, historical fiction. Anytime he does a period piece, I'm like, I'm in. I had a rough time with Exodus, Gods and Kings. That one just didn't resonate with me. There was a little too much supernatural going on that one. I'm not as big a fan as of when he goes into magic, or I guess not necessarily just magic, but also mythology, as he did with that one, religion and mythology. He is jumping back into historical fiction with Battle of Britain coming up, so really excited about that. Expecting some good, gritty air combat in that one. Like I said, I didn't have a problem with Robin Hood. Kingdom of Heaven was good. G.I. Jane, you know, another military great. I actually really like Black Rain. You know, Black Rain was, you know, probably categorized as a run-of-the-mill late 80s action movie. Really enjoyed it. Big Michael Douglas fan. So, yeah, I don't know. And then obviously Blade Runner with the sci-fi. So and Alien with the sci-fi. So he's really covering a lot of area that I personally enjoy.
So I think Ridley Scott is normally, he comes in different flavors, as Brian kind of alluded to. And so he's versatile to a degree. Not that he's going to go out there and like do a comedy movie or something like that. But I think that this is one that he took a really brave approach by making it about a team instead of an individual. And I think, however, unfortunately, at times it becomes very hard to follow, particularly for a first-time watcher. So he does a good job of getting you the immediate background. I like how at the beginning of the movie they give you a number of facts, of which we may get into here, some of those in a little bit. But I feel a little bit bad for saying this, but I felt so scattered, and it was a little on the long side, and I was very disoriented to the point where I watched a documentary on the Black Hawk Down incident to help me prepare for this, and I admittedly liked the documentary a little better. So
I get that. And the thing is, I'd watch a documentary on this anyway, just because, you know, the history of it is fascinating to me. Back on what we were talking about a few minutes ago, though, he actually did toy with a comedy once. Matchstick Men was a crime comedy with Nicolas Cage. So, you know, not going to make my top 10 list of movies he's done, but, you know, he was trying to get outside the box a little bit.
Yeah. So what do you think about him getting behind the camera here? What does this movie look like to you? Like, is it... Go ahead.
Well, like you said, it is a very intense movie. They really push the envelope on keeping you in the fast pace, showing that the situation was fluid. Things were changing all the time. People were struggling to adapt, to come up with new plans of action and that sort of thing. Really, Sam Shepard has a line in the movie where he's like, we're losing the initiative here. And that really sums up the essential problem with what happened historically in this battle is they went in fast, they succeeded, and then something happened, and that one, kind of butterfly effect thing, that one thing happened, and it really drastically changed how this whole thing turned out.
You are right about that, and this movie is ultimately about some missteps that lead to a from bad to worse situation, and it is interesting to see the high cost of making a mistake in this situation. It's not a movie that like says, "Oh no, something's wrong, and we're going to fix this in 10 minutes." Put you through a little bit of tension. It is a bit of a downward spiral for, I would say, a majority of the movie, wouldn't you? And then it somehow kind of works out okay in the end. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, like you said, it's a works out okay as in not everyone died. Then yeah, it's just, I think the movie is more a nod or salute, if you will, to the bravery of the men who refuse to leave their comrades behind. And that's really the gem of this, is it really does illustrate that being in the military is an honor and you're fighting for your country, but Eric Bana really says it best, that it's about the man next to you. And I think they illustrated it very, very well in this film.
You know what? That is really well said. That's a fair point. What do we think about the atmosphere of this movie, Brian?
Fast pace. I mean, it's an adrenaline pump, basically from the word go for the mission. And they do a really good job with dropping some jokes and showing camaraderie prior to the battle. But man, once the first couple bullets start flying, it's intensely pushing you through this battle.
Oh, he's right. I mean, they really don't let up. You're, like I said, you're disoriented. You're hopping from one unit to another. These guys are separated. Other people are coming in and going out. There's constant motion, and there's always people firing at you, and you can't really even see them or where they're coming from. And I think to some degree, that's a feeling that Ridley Scott wanted to give you, because undeniably, if you were down in those streets there, you would be a little bit disoriented yourself. So
I have a lot of deja vu moments and kind of, I'm not even sure if there's really a word for this, but it's one of those things where I watch a movie and I remember either watching it at a different time or something of that nature, where it makes me want to do something else while I'm watching it. So I'm one of those weird people that watches TV shows or DVDs or whatever on my laptop while I'm playing video games. So I was watching this and it reminded me of playing like Battlefield 1942, which, obviously older style of combat, or even Battlefield Vietnam on my laptop in college. And while I was watching it, it just gave me that nostalgia. And I was like, oh, I don't even have anything that will run those games anymore, which also made me feel old.
So this movie takes place in Somalia, and if you're not versed in where Somalia is, it's the easternmost tip out on the peninsula, on the, as you might call it, the Horn of Africa. It's at the mouth of the Red Sea. And so it's interesting. It is in Africa, but at the same time, it is in the Gulf area and part of the Middle East in a way. So none of this film was actually filmed in Somalia. They went to a similar looking cities and Rabat and then Saleh and Morocco, and no Somali actors are actually in the cast. But Somalia at the time was super dangerous to go to, very unstable. So can't blame him for that, can you?
Nope, not a bit.
As I mentioned, I watched a documentary about this, so there was a lot of information on that. So I'm going to just condense a few things just for some background on this. I thought it might be helpful to give a little picture of what the history of Somalia is. In 1920, and you had the British and the Italians that were owned half and half of Somalia. But by 1960, the UN agreement made it so that both the British and the Italians pulled out of Somalia and gave them independence. By 63, Kenya was no longer with diplomatic relations with Britain because they had backed Kenya and given a small district of land to Kenya, which was occupied by Somalis. So Somalia is kind of on its own, and their president is assassinated in 1969, and Major General Mohammed Saeed Barre raises to power and has policies that is more towards the USSR. The Somali government engages in a war in Ethiopia where they're backing rebels over there, and over the course of 8 months, a huge chunk of their army is depleted. So in 1991, President Mohammed Saeed Barre flees the country, and his departure leaves Somalia in the hands of guerrilla groups and warlords, and there's a vacuum of power. And that's where this movie starts to pick up. And Africa is experiencing one of its worst droughts on record in 1992, and there's pervasive famine, killing 300,000 people. And that's where this movie picks up, when U.S. troops are sent in to protect the delivery of food in 1992. And they were ambushed by warlord Muhammad Faria Adid, who ambushes the troops and drags their bodies through the streets. And that gets America involved in the area. But as this movie points out, we quickly realize that this is not an easy to resolve situation. And Somalia is entrenched in anarchy for another 15 years. And even after that, it's still complicated. So just to give a picture of the complicated mess that Somalia is. You're coming into this movie in the midst of when nobody's in control, pretty much.
Yeah, lots of little groups vying for control. A lot of warlords pop up in these power vacuum situations, and that's never good for your common person.
You know, at one point they mentioned that it might not be such a bad place to be if it wasn't so war-torn. The weather's not so terrible. It's often between 70 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And a little bit about the country itself. Like I said, it is a Muslim nation. So even though it's Africa, it may be, like I said, its identity is distinctly has aspects of being Middle Eastern as well. So there is extreme religious practice there. It's not necessarily the best place for women. They definitely practice genital mutilation, and they require veils and head covers. Homosexuality punishable by death. So this is a rough, stateless place that is it's hard to be in. And at the beginning of the movie, we see emaciated humans that are just skin and bones, and they're starving, and there's an ongoing war with Kenya for oil. This is just not a place you want to be if you haven't gathered it from what I'm saying.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's one of the harder parts of this movie. Watching a lot of movies requires willing suspension of disbelief. It's never, if you sit down and think about it, this is a very, very difficult movie to be like, oh, I love watching this movie, because all of this stuff really happened. Men lost their lives. Somali people, it was huge genocide. All of those are incredibly weighty and horrible things. And so I don't ever want to give off the idea it's like, oh, I love this movie based on an entertainment standpoint. So please don't think I'm going that direction. But it is hard sometimes to put yourself in a gear where you're watching a movie for entertainment's sake when so many horrible things had to happen for it to be made.
Yeah, it's true. And so this takes place in 1992. The background starts off in 1992, and they tell you about Muhammad Farah Adid as the most powerful warlord there, who has kind of taken control of the capital of Mogadishu. And so in April of 93, we have attacks of UN peacekeepers who are there to deliver food to people. And in June, they killed 24 Pakistani soldiers that target American personnel. And in August, the U.S. Delta Force is sent into Mogadishu to remove Adid. And this is a 3-week mission that turned into 6. And the U.S. became impatient, as the intro of the movie points out. And so this particular movie revolves around going in to intercept 2 key members of Adid's, I guess you could call cabinet, or 2 of his main advisors in his organization. So,
yeah, I actually think that they. I don't know if this part is historically accurate in the movie or not. They actually take quite a few more than 2 in the movie. So I don't know if it was targets of circumstance. They just happened to be there, so they took everybody, or if that part actually happened. They may have just bumped it up to give you more of an idea of how important it was to make that personnel grab.
They did get the 2 in real life, so it's hard. I didn't see that in the documentary, but it's interesting to note that the mission actually was a success. They did intercept the 2 people that they wanted to take into custody. The movie doesn't really point that out, does it? Or did I forget something there?
Well, you know that they get out with their truckload of people, although during several parts where the convoy is trying to leave the city, you definitely see people. It's an open back truck in the way that it had a tarp over it, but clearly not bulletproof. So you definitely see in the movie some of these people they pick up that are in the back of this truck being shot too.
No, you're right about that. And as you mentioned before, this is somewhat about the men's relationships with each other, and less so about just the mission. Like I said, to some degree, the documentary helps clear up the big picture, and this is a little more between the men and themselves. So.
Yeah, and if you are a set design kind of person, if you're into the aesthetics of movies like this, it's also worth noting that there is a 2003 video about designing Mogadishu for this movie, and what they did in terms of setting it up and showing the roadblocks and, actually starting fires to make this realistic, the rubber that they burn to send up basically smoke signals to the militia to let them know that American soldiers were coming.
Yeah. Funny you should mention that. We talked about the emaciated forms in the beginning. The opening sequences, and this is just one of my favorite special effects as you're talking about effects, the opening sequences depict those starving Somalis, but they're actually rubber bodies that they created, and then they have a breathing hose like pumping air into the human form to simulate the appearance of breathing. They, thank goodness, didn't starve anybody that much, and then filmed them.
Yeah, and again, that's really the terrible part. It's easier to watch a Robin Hood or something like that because, it's heavy fiction. But the one real dark part of this movie is the fact that it all really happened.
Well, that's why the U.S. had, I believe, good intentions to go in. The UN was there to provide food to people who were starving, but the warlord Adid was, using hunger as a weapon, and they mentioned this in the movie, and so it's important to see that. And like I said, this is in many ways a well-made movie with a lot of poignant imagery, but it's also an ugly movie in terms of the content that it has to capture. So it does not glorify war, and that's something that Ridley Scott said that he did not want to do. So
absolutely.
Let's talk about the soundtrack here for a minute. I thought it was interesting. It's kind of a tale of two halves. The movie has quite a long lead-in, and we get a lot of really interesting, popular rock and roll iconic songs, many of which would have been contemporary for the 93 setting, which I really like them anchoring the time of the movie to the setting. But then when they go to battle, you start to have a much more symphonic, more instrumental, kind of intense score that takes over, and the rock and roll is long gone after that point. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it's what's going on. They spend so much at the beginning of the movie kind of getting you immersed in the culture of soldiers and their downtime. And in the time-honored tradition of a lot of war movies, using a lot of pop culture music of the time. I mean, you can go all the way back to your Apocalypse Now using The Doors or, whatever. But they even used, Marlene Dietrich or something for a World War II. So it's definitely a tradition in war movies to use the tenor of the time, if you will. And once you get into the battle, then it's the music can make or break a scene, and at that point you're using music as emotion.
I think to some degree there was a sense of confidence in the men in the first part of the movie before the mission begins, wouldn't you say? And like there's kind of a sense of like we got a lot of big guns here, and we're pretty confident we're gonna run the show over here. Am I wrong in saying that's kind of the, let me say they exude confidence in the beginning? Is that a fair statement?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's true 100% of service personnel. I mean, you're there to do a terrible thing. Anytime that you bring a gun with you to enforce something, then, killing can always or will always happen. And, that's not always something you want to be dwelling on. So keeping up the confidence, being jovial. Like I said, I use humor for a lot of stuff. So joking around with your friends and that sort of thing that are in your unit, that's all necessary. I think they showed that camaraderie well in the beginning. But they also then use that. Ridley Scott really uses that to turn a wrench in your heart once you see these guys start to drop.
Yeah, so there's a lot of music I really liked in here. You had Elvis's "We're Caught in a Trap," which was kind of a foreshadowing of something that comes up. They have like rock and roll music done in some kind of Middle Eastern language. That was kind of interesting to ground you in the location. House of Pains jump around when the men are just playing basketball at the base. One that I Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I particularly liked Right Turn by Alice in Chains featuring Chris Cornell. Always be a Chris Cornell fan. May he rest in peace.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's another one where Ewan McGregor is lamenting, he's lamenting the fact that he's just making coffee and he's behind a desk, and he's kind of exhibiting regret that he served in Desert Storm, I believe, and didn't get to do anything heroic. And you have Stone Temple Pilots, one of my favorite bands, Creep, playing in there, and one of the big lines for that is "I'm half the man I used to be." I thought that was probably my favorite music moment of these. You could call them popular rock iconic songs in the early part there. Sure. Faith No More, Somebody Put Me Together. I like that as the men are assembling to go out. That nature of putting people together. So Ridley Scott's picking up on the lyrics, but also the attitude is there. But later on, things switch to tribal drums with hollow, haunting vocals that are just more instrumental, where the voice is used more as an instrument, and they are quite haunting, and strings that are full of suspense. What do we think about the music when they go out in the battlefield, Brian?
As I mentioned earlier, I think that music can just make or break a movie if it's done right. And I give kudos to anybody who does soundtracks for movies, or specifically the workers who say, "Ooh, I think this track fits here." I can't tell you how often I use Shazam to find out what a song is during a television show or movie. And I would say the vast majority of the songs that I look up are because I heard them in something and it fit that mood or that scene so well that I'm like, "Ooh, I need to remember this."
So, do you want to get into Lick for this?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to go first here. We'll just take turns going back and forth with some interesting trivia or fun facts that you have about the movie or the making of the movie. Nelson's character, Ewan Bremner, says to Twombly, "Just don't fire that thing too close to my head. I can barely hear as it is." Bremner actually partially lost his hearing. The actor lost his hearing after that scene because of the gunfire. Even though there aren't live bullets, this thing is actually going off next to his head. And eventually he got it back, but for a period of time, he did not have full functioning hearing in his ear, which is pretty wild to say. So.
Yeah, and actually on that too, a lot of the radio chatter that you hear throughout the film is actual radio chatter from the battle.
Oh, I actually didn't know that one. That's pretty cool. That's a nice layer there.
Yep, they use recordings from the actual battle.
That's a good find. The Department of Defense gave the producers a platoon of Army Rangers who did the rope scenes when casting, or I said setting in from the helicopters down on the ground. So those are real trained soldiers doing that. So that's cool.
Just not the one that missed it. That was all Orlando Bloom.
Flop.
Not that that's funny for the real guy that actually got injured.
That's true. No, again, that did happen. That started this whole incident. So, on the last
again, it's a tale of two things with this movie. It's like, hey, I'm not trying to belittle the piece that it was horrible, but we are talking about the entertainment piece of the movie.
Yes, yeah. And so on the last day of their long week-long Army Ranger orientation at Fort Benning, the actors actually went and got to meet the types of soldiers that they were portraying. And the Rangers gave them a letter, and they slipped it under the door of the actors there, and they thanked them for their hard work, and they said, tell our story true. And they signed with all the names of the Rangers who had worked with them, and they also had printed on them the names of the soldiers who died in the Mogadishu firefight. So that's pretty cool. I mean,
absolutely.
Imagine being an actor and getting that kind of that'd be one of those moments that at the end of your career you might look back on and say, like, that shows you why this movie is special to me.
Certainly. One of my favorite scenes from the movie, just to kind of show soldiers are typically prone to things being kept normal because any deviation might jinx it. Superstitious, that's the word I'm looking for. So soldiers are prone to being superstitious. That's why you see a lot of like first recon guys never eat charms as a rule, just because they think it's bad luck. So one of the things I really liked in the movie was as Sergeant Eversman's chalk is assembling in the chopper, Sam Shepard, who's the commanding general, comes out and wishes him luck. And Hartnett gets this kind of horrified look on his face, and Ewan McGregor goes, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "I don't know. He's just never done that before." And Ewan McGregor goes, "Oh." So yeah. That made me laugh just because it goes into that, superstition of the soldiers and that sort of thing.
That's right. One other thing that I want to mention is in the documentary, they actually had a really helpful diagram to show what parts of town that they were in and how far the Black Hawk Down incident was from the next chopper that went down and where the men were on the street. So this was all very helpful. You don't get a good sense for that at all in the movie. But in there, they talked about the RPGs that the terrorists, or I would say the warlord or the fighters, are using, and they're shooting up at the helicopters. And they were explaining in the documentary, it was extremely dangerous. They did not bring in the proper amount of equipment, and it was only a matter of time before one of these things got hit, because there are literally hundreds of RPG explosives being launched up at these helicopters, because apparently they're not that hard to come by. They're not that expensive, and they're basically like a missile-propelled grenade, pretty much. Yep. And that's enough to take down a chopper like this.
Absolutely, and that's what RPG stands for, is rocket-propelled grenade. I do not envy anybody who flies support in these situations. I can't imagine what kind of chaos having these little rockets firing at you constantly must cause you. That's hats off to the people who can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is part of the time where I want to ask you, how did this movie affect you when you watched this? Like, what you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but talk more about this. Like, how does it make you feel, and does it remind you of anything in your own personal experiences?
I mean, I watch and read a lot of history. Like I said, my uncle was in the military, so I've always been curious. Growing up, I've spent some time in Fort Hood, Texas, when he was commanding a tank battalion, and got to see them out on maneuvers and stuff like that. So, just having those experiences makes me list toward types of movies like this because just find them fascinating. I think that this sort of movie it's inspiring to see people, struggle and succeed, and to, anytime you get to watch real heroism in action, it just, it touches you. So yeah, I would say that's the big, you watch it and you feel pride because, there are people willing to go out and do this for their country. And, you want to feel that sense of, honor and duty by, really immersing yourself in the film.
Yeah. For me, I think particularly to Eric Bana's character, who really isn't too psyched to be there, but he's there to fulfill a duty and to do his job. And he talks about it and says, you know what I think? It doesn't really matter what I think. Once the first bullet goes past your head, politics and all that stuff just goes right out the window. And that, to me, takes me back to maybe junior high times when you have to do something, you don't want to do it. And then, like, I might have had a tendency to just complain about it or to criticize, or do we really have to do it this way, or do we have to do it? And that's counterproductive. It slows you down, and you realize, whether it be at like camp or church camp or something like that, or Boy Scouts or wherever it is, school, if you have to do something, you got to do it anyway, and you complain a ton, you're just going to lose friends, and you're not going to do it, and you're not going to have a good time. So the best thing to do is to be a good teammate. Knock it out. Do what needs to be done. Take it seriously so you don't have to do it 5 times over. And then you have more time to do what you want to do. And that's, in a way, what soldiers are out there doing. They're doing not what they want to do, but what needs to be done, so that you and they, when they're finished, can go home, be with their families, and do what they need to do. So you can apply that to any kind of part of your own life, whether it be in your community, at work, at church, or even in your own family. There's always things that suck and you just don't want to do them. But if you buckle down and just do what needs to be done and get through it, you'll have a better time afterwards. So that's just something I take away from this one.
Oh, sure. I feel like I'm just going to go play this for all of my employees going into the holiday season. Just go get it done.
And some of you some of you may not be coming back home.
After Black Friday, yeah. I did see that, according to Chris Kyle, American Sniper, that they show this film to U.S. Navy Special Forces recruits to inspire them before they begin Hell Week for SEAL training.
Interesting. I did not. Well, it makes sense. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
It has a strong sense of realism. I mean, there are people who have served that said this is one of those movies that feels more faithful. So,
sure,
there's a lot to be said for that. So, Brian, you ready for some superlatives?
Sure. Yeah, let's go for it.
MVP, you get to go first.
I'm going to go with Tom Sizemore on this one. I really liked his character, and I haven't gotten to talk about him at all. His portrayal of Steele, who is the ground team's commander, was just fantastic. I mean, he had that, stoic, calm under fire mentality down really well for the movie. One of my favorite lines is when they had to stop to assess damage and get a KIA driver out of a driver's seat who had actually been hit with an RPG. They get the convoy moving again. He tells his driver to get in and drive, and he's like, "But sir, I'm shot." And he's like, "We're all shot. Get and drive." So going back to your just do your job kind of thing. His character is just one of those ones that, even though it's not meant to make you laugh, sometimes it makes you laugh.
I really enjoyed him in this, and his character stood out to me as one of those, like, man, this guy is tough. I mean, he gets shot in the neck, am I right? And
Yep.
and doesn't stop.
Or at least, it's either he was shot in the neck or shrapnel he gets hit with something.
He's seriously injured, and
yeah,
he just keeps on going through. He could have gone back and easily said, "I need medical attention," but I mean, he's one of those, like you said, stoic. Definitely describes the character. That's an excellent pick. So I'm gonna kind of cheat on this one and break the fourth wall and say my MVP are the real life Delta Force soldiers who really did this, and it was there's without them there's no story to be told here, and they acted bravely in a time when things are just not going well. So everything seems to be crumbling around them, and there are a real group of people who got in there and cut their losses and helped to save each other and get everybody out of they could. So a great loss. So.
Oh, absolutely. The UN peacekeepers, two of them actually died in the real battle. Army Rangers, the SOAR unit, Delta, everybody who sacrificed, and everybody who does sacrifice, everybody who is in, places that aren't Somalia. We've got men and women all over the world that sacrifice and who risk their lives for us, and that's an absolute fantastic superlative.
So I might be downgrading supporting out of this, but so I'm going to just copy you and say for my best supporting actor, I went Sizemore as well. So I'm kind of step for step with you on that one. How about you for best supporting?
If I'm going to go with supporting, I'm going to go with Sam Shepard on this. I really liked his portrayal of the commanding general. He does that stoic piece well too. I also really, really liked, obviously we talked about Ewan McGregor's character, and just to give a shout out to John here, I know one of my favorite characters and his probably favorite character was Eric Bana's Hoot, just based on his actions throughout the entire movie. His dialogue is fantastic, so if John were here, he'd definitely be plugging the Eric Bana piece.
Yes, he would. Hidden gem. Brian, you go first.
Hidden gem is probably the fact that if you go back and watch this for the first time before listening to this podcast and you realize it's Tom Hardy that you're looking at, given how big Tom Hardy is right now with, he's got time to do blockbuster movies like Venom and The Revenant, but at the same time, he's putting out great content on miniseries. If you ever get a chance to check out Taboo. So a guy of many talents, but then, just kind of an Easter egg stuck in this movie because you go back and watch it and you're like, holy crap, that's Tom Hardy.
Would you
and
say
it's well
that
before you've ever heard of Tom Hardy?
Would you say that he's gone on to become the biggest actor in this movie, or would you still maybe Ewan McGregor still has?
Yeah, I would. Well, I'll tell you what, I'd say it's definitely between those two.
Yeah.
But it'd be one of the two of them. If you'd asked me maybe 5-10 years ago, I would have said Orlando Bloom, also, very minor character in this movie.
He's
in no means, he's obviously very important to the cast here. But I think Tom Hardy, Ewan McGregor, Orlando Bloom, all probably up there in the popularity scheme.
Yeah.
Although if you watch more foreign movies, you could say Eric Bana easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hidden gem for me, underappreciated and strangely low build in this. Jason Isaacs. I just I like this guy in everything he's in. So
he's good. He's real good.
And I did like him. I liked the argument that he got into with Fichtner there. And correct me if I'm wrong, one of them is a ranger, which is Fichtner, and one of them is a... how would you correctly describe Isaac's character? He's a...
So you actually got to flip it. Isaacs is a ranger commander, so he is actually in charge of all the ranger soldiers that took part in this battle. The other guy is just a sergeant. He's a platoon sergeant of a group of Delta. So Isaacs does outrank him, but he doesn't have any specific command over the Delta units. So it's kind of there's I wouldn't call it a power struggle, but there's also not a lot of love lost between the two characters.
But there's a culture difference in these two kinds of soldiers, as I understand it. The Deltas are kind of I wouldn't say less. They were called cowboys in this at one point. That they are perhaps more of a wild card that you throw in there, and they really scrap and. Am I describing this well?
Yeah, anytime you have a unit that is billed characteristically as elite, there is a certain amount of swagger that comes along with it. I'll plug this right now. If you ever get a chance to watch HBO's Generation Kill, based on a book written by a Rolling Stone author who is embedded with Marine Force Recon in Iraq. And, these units, they plan stuff out to do, like every member wears a hat at a certain time because, that's what distinguishes them. So the Army Rangers are, much more clean cut, much more disciplined. The Delta Force operatives, I'll use operatives as a word because they're being sent in as spies into Mogadishu. So there's definitely a swagger, would be probably the most polite thing I can, or way I could go about it. But that doesn't go over well with Isaac's character, who wants the regimented discipline.
Right, and he's in fairness, he's guarding over a younger, less trained unit, and as you mentioned, sticking to your training is a lot more valuable to them. And so I thought it was also interesting in the documentary. They said that interviews, like the younger people who were the Rangers, said that they really looked up to the Deltas in some ways. And in a moment where a Delta is killed in real life, that was when it was like, oh my gosh, they can kill one of those guys. This is real. It was a perception change for the soldiers who were there. So
I was always really curious about this part because I've also seen movies where they depict Ranger School, and that's one of the elite units of the U.S. Armed Forces. So I was always kind of curious about how they portrayed Army Rangers in this versus the Delta, and if there was ever any bitterness from U.S. Rangers about being portrayed as the younger, less experienced, or younger kind of.
Admittedly, again, it was one of them speaking on behalf of this other unit, the Deltas, and I think you've straightened me out. Thank you for doing that. And he was just simply saying like, "Oh, this stuff got real." So,
right.
Yeah. Anyway, and if you weren't already aware that it was real, it's for real. So, recast. If you could recast anybody or had to recast anybody in the cast, who would you recast and why?
I have a hard time with these questions just because when I end up really liking a movie and I really settle into it, I have a hard time picturing anybody else in these positions. If I were being funny, I would recast Orlando Bloom's character with Tobey Maguire.
Orlando Bloom. Oh. Explain yourself.
Well, it's portrayed in the movie that, you know, and I guess in real life that him missing that rope was really the whole thing that started this. I don't have any real problem with Orlando Bloom, but I kind of don't like Tobey Maguire. So I would shift somebody that
Wow. Okay.
I don't particularly like into that position.
I was actually quite taken with Orlando Bloom's performance. I thought he conveyed
he did a great job.
young,
I don't think
enthusiastic, like, you know, like I'm ready to go out and get him, and kind of. So that's interesting.
I actually feel really mean right now for saying that. I just,
no, it's okay.
I don't know. I have a hard time recasting people who do a great job. And you know, I bet there are a bunch of Tobey Maguire fans out there, but I just not one of them.
He hates Spider-Man too, guys. I mean, attack.
I hate that Spider-Man.
Boo.
Anyway, that particular Spider-Man.
I hung you out to dry just now. I'm sorry.
It was a dark moment for me in superhero film.
Anyway, so for my recast, I'm going to go at the other end of the spectrum. I'm actually going to go to the higher end of the billing and say I would like to recast Josh Hartnett. His character, he did not leave the kind of impression. As you mentioned, if anybody probably is supposed to be the 1A or 1B protagonist in this, it would be him. And for some reason, his introspective moments of thinking, you know, I believe that we're here to do good and trying to grapple with this, you know, morally, like, for him was an important part of this. I just didn't feel like he came off with, he was given a lot of opportunity, and I can't say that he capitalized. I feel like other people had less to do with or had less opportunity and exceeded him in this. So, you know, it's not 100%. I don't think he would have gotten this role at this time, but I would propose to put Chris Evans in his place.
Yeah, I could see it. Maybe Chris Evans today, as opposed to what Chris Evans looked like back then. Just in terms of, he's much more. We see him now as the soldier because of, you know, Captain America and that sort of thing.
Well, he would have been. He would have been around the time to be. I mean, you know, he's not that much younger than Hartnett, I don't think, is he?
So Chris Evans is only 3 years younger than Josh Hartnett, and he's coming off of Not Another Teen Movie, so I stand by my choice on this one.
Yeah, but I remember him in earlier movies. He was just a lot smaller in stature, a lot thinner. Like I said earlier in the podcast, I'm a Hartnett fan, and I do feel like that statement is it puts me on an island. It may not be the smallest island, but it definitely puts me on an island. I like seeing guys like Hartnett who I think get unfairly relegated to the romantic comedy or drama roles that they played in first. There's another really awesome actor who has broken through the walls that were kind of put there for him, and now he's in quite a few good action movies, is John Krasinski. So, known for The Office, known for being kind of goofy and funny. 13 Hours was fantastic. If you haven't checked out Jack Ryan on Amazon Prime, fantastic, based on the Tom Clancy character. But, there are people that kind of get lopped into certain roles and then they kind of live there their whole life. So I like seeing guys like this branching out and taking these other ones.
Well, you're right. I shouldn't take away great performances like Hollywood Homicide away from him. Sorry.
That's a hard one to defend. I get it. But I mean, you also got to give a shout out to like Lucky Number 11, which was
I do like that movie.
Fantastic movie.
That's probably my favorite Hartnett movie. So best shot, and to be more specific, this is your best cinematic moment in the movie.
Best cinematic moment in the movie.
I've got a couple. So let me go with one of my favorites is at the very beginning where they pick up Eric Bana's character. He's carrying his bicycle. He had just done some recon in Mogadishu, and they're flying back, and you see the wild boars charging through the water, and he looks over and says, "Who's hungry?" And they, shoot one and bring it back for dinner. I feel like that really illustrated that it is a beautiful country, and if you take the conflict and the horror out of it, that there are wonderful places around the world that we hope will be wonderful places again after these awful things go away.
Yeah,
the
it's
other
gonna take
one,
some work though.
yeah, absolutely. As far as cinematography goes, one of my favorite parts is where Josh Hartnett has to throw a strobe light on top of the adjacent buildings so the helicopters could provide them with air support. And there's this shot of him running across and the bullets are hitting at his feet. And it's kind of this slow motion thing where he gets there and kind of, like you said, just gets the job done and comes back. And I always kind of like that scene. The third one, not to take up too much time on it or gobble up all the
Man,
the
he's
good
really
stuff.
going. Yeah, this is like a buffet of best shots. Go ahead. Yeah.
Another one I really liked just for the gravity of it was after the first helicopter goes down, there's a crew chief on it. I think it was the crew chief who climbs out. He obviously has a head wound. He's got blood coming out of his helmet in every direction, and he's defending the crash site, horribly outnumbered and injured. And there's probably about a minute of the movie that keeps flashing back to him doing it until he gets some backup. And I always thought that was that was one of the bread and butter scenes that really conveyed what I think the number one message of the movie was, and that was, brotherhood.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some great choices there. And so I'm going to go with the simple when the helicopters are together in formation, they're flying along the coast, kind of what Brian was saying, getting a feel for the land from overhead. I wish there had been more overhead shots, especially during the conflict, just to help orient you. But I really liked that. The music's inspiring, and it kind of has the, it's the men going out on a mission moment, and I like that. So, best scene.
I kind of, I think I probably used a couple of mine there for moments, but I would say that one of my favorite scenes was the Tom Sizemore kind of laying it down for his soldier when he's like, "But sir, I'm shot," and he's like, "We're all shot. Get in the truck and foot on the gas." Like that was just one of those, we're still in this, we're not dead yet. Let's go.
For my best scene, there's a moment where there's so many hurt men that load up the rescue vehicles that the healthy men have to run back to the base behind the vehicles, and it's a pretty perilous course that they have to run. And the real soldiers call it the Mogadishu Mile. And so I think the music was good. They use slow-mo. It shows you how tired these men are after this long conflict, and this is the last stretch to get back to the base, and it is in no way a cakewalk. So that was my choice for best scene.
Yeah, it's a fantastic choice, too.
Best quote?
I've said it twice now. I'm going with Tom Sizemore.
Okay, yeah, good choice. I did like the quote at the beginning saying only the dead have seen the end of war by Plato. That would be my my favorite quote, but I'm going to give a small nod to Ethan Bremner's character, that Ewan Bremner's character. "Why do I have to stay here?" And Hartnett goes, "Because you're dependable." And he goes, "Man, I hate being dependable."
Right.
So if you're the director, you're Ridley Scott. So after you finish telling yourself you're awesome, what one thing do you change in this movie?
One thing I change in the movie. I actually, I had mentioned this once to you, and to I think much chagrin, Movie could have actually been a little longer. I would have been down for more character development in the beginning, more camaraderie sequences, and maybe some more explanation to really show how long these guys were at the ragged edge.
Um, yeah, I'm not on board with that, but that's a good. Hey, that's why we have everybody on here for different. It's a long movie. It is a long movie. Um, For me, I would just like to jump around less. Again, having aerial shots, transitions that go from like, I want to see Hartnett and these guys waiting to see like, hey, they're supposed to come out for us. And I would like to see the camera move up out of the streets, pan over the buildings, and move over to another site where the helicopter goes down. Again, I've mentioned it probably too many times already, but there are ways to help bring relationship of distance, numbers of people, and the numbers of people coming after them. So getting a more solid understanding for what the situation really is. That would be helpful personally. And it could be as simple as having Sam Shepard's character at base looking at maps a little more often than they do in there and having a few more check-ins. So
Sure.
Anyway, Brian, before we go into the ratings, do we want to plug anything?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to a couple of further watchings. So if you like this, you may also like these. Like I said, I'm a big fan of these kind of war movies. So if you like this movie, you should definitely check out Jake Gyllenhaal and Jarhead. Check out We Were Soldiers. A lot of great actors in that one.
Well, it's time to rate the movie on a 5-star scale. What would you rate this movie?
Going 5.
Going 5.
All 5.
Okay. So I actually talked to John ahead of time. Even though he couldn't make it, he said to put in the rating for 4.5 for him. He definitely echoes a lot of the sentiments that Brian has as well along the way, and definitely one that he likes to return to as well. For me, I have a greater appreciation for this movie in that I studied it in preparation for this, but it's a hard watch for me. It's not really enjoyable. It does not glorify war, and that's important, and it tells an important story that could easily be forgotten. And so while it's an important movie, and it's a well-made movie from the standpoint of the visuals and showing what it's really like to be in that, and I have to go with a 2.5, and that's just
Ouch.
I know, and I figured you were going to skewer me a little bit on that, and I probably deserve it, but it's just a hard watch, and it's very long to sit through. There's a certain point at which point I just go, man, I just feel like, I don't want to be here anymore, and to some degree, I think that's what he wants you to feel. So, I'm sometimes guilty of liking the movies that you have fun with or that you get to escape on. This is very gritty, very real. So I apologize. I apologize.
No, I definitely think that at some point in time I have to take myself out of the mindset that all this stuff really happened to a certain degree to have the enjoyment factor that I do for this movie, the rewatchability. But it's important to do that sometimes with movies because in the end, the what this movie conveyed to me was, that brotherhood, that camaraderie, and the pride that we have people willing to do that. And I think as long as the overriding message and the fact that, you're remembering an important piece of history, so you're not hopefully doomed to repeat it.
Absolutely. So, Brian, you're going to have to stand in John's place here and make a great choice for him. It will be up to you. Next time, we're going to have some suspense movies, and we're going to do, I've got 3 options for you. Ready?
Go for it.
Rear Window, 1954. It's an Alfred Hitchcock film where a wheelchair-bound photographer spies on his neighbors from his apartment window and becomes convinced that one of them has committed a murder, starring James Stewart and Grace Kelly. Option 2, Blue Velvet from 1986. The discovery of a severed human ear found in a field leads a young man on an investigation related to a beautiful, mysterious nightclub singer and a group of psychopathic criminals who have kidnapped her child. Director David Lynch leads you on an adventure here. Kyle MacLachlan, Isabella Rossellini, and Dennis Hopper are in this one. And option 3, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane from 1962? A former child star torments her paraplegic sister in their decaying Hollywood mansion.
Well, you just picked all the happy ones, didn't you?
Well, it's suspenseful. I don't know what to say.
Let's see here. If I am going to pick on this one, I am going to go with my one of my favorite directors, with David Lynch's Blue Velvet. Not my favorite movie of his. That goes to Lost Highway, also one of the best soundtracks ever. But yeah, you guys should definitely talk about David Lynch's Blue Velvet.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you so much for doing double duty for us. It was a great show anyway. I'm really sad John couldn't make it with us, but I had a lot of fun doing it with you. So we'll definitely have you
Russ,
back
always
sometime.
a pleasure, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, terrific.
So to all the listeners out there, please rate, review, and subscribe the show on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast, and it helps grow the show. We really appreciate you doing that for us. And give us a like on Facebook and write to us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Brian?
Well, like Steven says at the battle in Braveheart, the Almighty tells me he can get me out of this mess, but he's pretty sure you're effed.